Many people say that sometimes data can speak for itself. And sometimes you might have created a figure where you think, okay, that figure really tells people more than 1,000 words. But to be very honest, most of the time, that's not really the case. And it's almost always a good idea to accompany the results that you have created with R, or the figures you created with R, to accompany them with an adequate amount of words, usually coming in the form of written text. And this might be difficult at times. You have your R code, you have your figures, and then you need some text, and you have to integrate everything in one document. Then you update the figure, doesn't fit anymore exactly with the text. So it would be nice to have everything like in one piece, like the written text, the figures, your code, everything. And this is exactly what Quarto, or formerly R Markdown, have been developed for. They allow you to have your whole data science story, from the import of the data, the creation of the figures, the analytic modeling, and the writing of text in one piece, in one document. And this makes it very easy to create reproducible reports. And even more so, Quarto and R Markdown, they can be used to write books, to create websites, to write blogs, and to do so much more. So it's really a very good investment, especially because it is not as difficult as it might sound in the first place. If you've taken your first steps in R and you're already familiar with the basics of the language, I'm pretty sure learning Quarto will not be that difficult for you. And this is exactly what this session is about, to introduce you to Quarto and R Markdown, give you an idea what it is, how it can be used in your workflow, and to get together the first concepts that are important to get started. So this is what we are trying to achieve today. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit about what Quarto is and how it relates to R Markdown. You will encounter both terms regularly in the R world, and both are important. Quarto is a little bit newer, and R Markdown has been there and has been very successful for a very long time. So it's a good idea to know about both of them, although strictly speaking, we will focus a little bit more on Markdown here. Still, you will see this left symbol here many times if you're operating within the R framework. In this context, you will also hear the terms knit-R or the package R Markdown. And in the very beginning, we just want to clarify these terms so you're not confused about them. Then we will actually start to learn how you can actually write a Quarto document. And the nice thing is, once you know how to write a Quarto document, it's not that difficult to learn how to write a Quarto book, a Quarto blog, how to create a Quarto web page, and so forth. Yeah? It's really about getting the basics right. And this is because this variety of different things you can achieve with Quarto is that it helps you to create a wide variety of different formats. So it's not that difficult to write a document that looks nice in HTML, but can also be rendered to a PDF format. And it's, I guess, these basics that you need to learn in the beginning. Once you figure out how that works, the rest is not that difficult anymore. Finally, I would also like to make some remarks regarding project management. Because while Quarto in itself is not very difficult to handle, there are some specific challenges you should be aware of with regard to where you should save your files, what kind of paths you should use within a Quarto document, and so forth. So that's also brings us to the outline of today. We talk a little bit about what is Quarto. We do around Quarto step by step, where you basically learn how to develop your first Quarto document and make these remarks on project management. And in the end, we learn how to avoid some very common Quarto mistakes when it comes to the creation of documents, which make your document look very ugly, but are actually very easy to avoid. So let's start with this question of what is Quarto in the first place? And before I want to answer this question, what is Quarto, I think it makes some sense to say, okay, what is actually R Markdown? Because R Markdown has been there for quite some time. And R Markdown is, in the end, a document format that allows you to write documents containing code of two languages. And this is a little bit fancy language I'm using here, because in the end, these documents contain some R code that you use to, perform some statistical analysis, create some figures, etc. You basically know about that to some extent. And then the second thing that's included in R Markdown is, Markdown. And Markdown, I'm not really sure whether the term programming language is actually the right term. It's a language where you can create formatted text using a plain text editor. It's super easy to learn. It's super easy to handle. And it's actually very powerful because it allows you to write text containing a lot of formats that can still be edited using only plain text editor. So it's completely cross-platform. It's also very readable in its source. And as said, if rendered, it allows for all the formatting from more advanced programs such as Pages or Word or so on. So you can do basically everything you need, like bold letters, italic fonts. You can write tables, headings, etc., etc. It's super powerful. This is how Markdown looks like, and you immediately see, okay, it's directly readable, so every human can read it. It's not very pretty, and it's something you can basically edit in every plain text editor you want. But this is usually not how the final document in Markdown looks like, because the cool thing about Markdown is you take this source code and you can render this document to a wide variety of different formats. So here, this looks like, this is the same document, and this is how it looks like if it's formatted, if it's rendered into an HTML document. You could, however, render the same document into a PDF document. Then it would look slightly different, but still very nice. And that's the cool thing. So you write the document once, and you can create output documents in many different formats from that. And the idea of R Markdown is to have this nice feature of Markdown on the one hand, combined with the power of R, and to put everything in one single document. So together you can use R and R Markdown to write formatted texts and conduct statistical analysis within one single file. And this is perfect to make research accessible, reproducible, because people can basically download the source code of your final paper or your final report. In this session, we will not cover the basics of Markdown, because as you have seen, it's basically super trivial, and I think it would really be a waste of your time if I told you here how to write headings and create tables and so on. There's a great interactive Markdown tutorial that I have linked alongside this video, and I really recommend to do that. So because the best way of learning Markdown is really to do these interactive exercises and just go through all the things you actually need to do in practice, like I don't know, creating a table, writing bold text, having headings of different levels in your texts, and just to do it once and then use Google or any other search engine to search for how things are done in practice. It's really about trial and error in practice, and it's not difficult at all. So I really recommend you to just do the tutorial, and you're fine with that. So what's Quarto then? Quarto can basically be thought of a next generation of R Markdown. At least this is how the creators of Quarto would like to see it. It allows you basically to do everything you can do in R Markdown, almost everything in R Markdown, but with some additional features. Like, for example, it does not only work together with R, but also other languages that are very common in the data science community, like Python or Julia. It also has some additional features and capabilities, and it took many things that for R Markdown were added over time using particular extensions, particular packages, and it implemented them within the single Quarto framework from scratch. Also, it has some features that R Markdown doesn't have. Still, if you're already familiar with R Markdown, there's no reason to be afraid that R Markdown is going to be replaced by Quarto. Because the two are so similar and most code actually works in both of these languages, R Markdown will definitely stay. And people who have, for example, written books or created websites in R Markdown, myself included, they will probably stay in R Markdown for a very long time, because there's just no need to change this well-running system. If, however, you start from scratch and you haven't heard about R Markdown or Quarto in the first place, I guess right now it's better to start learning to use Quarto, and then to invest just a couple of minutes to see the difference to R Markdown. And this is exactly what we're doing here right now. We're doing an introduction to Quarto just want you to be very aware of the fact that R Markdown exists and there's nothing wrong of using it. There are also some quite specific extensions for R Markdown. Like for example, I created a package with exercises for data science that you might have used already if you're looking at these videos. And I created these exercises using a particular package that still requires me to write code in R Markdown. And that's perfectly fine. It's functioning very, very well. And this is how a Quarto document looks like. It has different parts, and we're going through them step by step. This is just to give you an overview of how these documents look like. This is how this document looks like if you render it to HTML. So you see there are many aspects that you will use regularly over time, like having a table of contents, having a nice ggplot, etc., etc. So the first part of every Quarto document is the header. It is written in a language called YAML, and you don't need to learn anything specific here other than how this header is exactly created. It's also super trivial. As you see, it contains meta information like the title of the document, the name of the author, the date. It also contains information about the format into which the document is to be rendered. And it allows you for every format to which you want to render the document to set specific meta information. So for example, in this case here, we want to render the document into HTML. We want to use a particular theme with general information about how it looks like, similar to a ggplot theme. We want to make sure we have a table of content. The table of content should be of depth 2. The documentation, the location of the table of contents should be at the top of the document in the body of the final document, and we want to number the sections. So it's really pretty trivial to read. And the important thing about the header is that it starts with 3 minus signs and it ends with 3 minus signs. So here it starts at line 1, it ends at line 12. You see in RStudio these little arrows that indicate the beginning and the end of the header of the document. And it's a good idea to really start to get the header right at the very beginning, so to set the meta information you need. There is no need to have a complete set of meta information for every document, but there are some meta information that you often have, like title and author and so forth. Then the following part of the document, this is actually Markdown code. So you see here what you have seen before in the example of Markdown that I've showed you. You see the section headers, you see the normal text written there, and so on and so forth. You also see R code, and this R code is usually called R chunk, an R chunk. So here we have 3 chunks, so 3 pieces of self-contained R code. And this is really code that you've seen before, that you can actually read. And there are also what is called so-called chunk options. Now, these chunk options can be used to tell the computer how this Quarto document should be rendered into the final here HTML document. What are typical examples for things that you set in the chunk options? So you see, for example, in line 31 and 32, the 2 options echo false and warning false. Here you tell R actually to not print the code used to create the figure in the final file. Because so you see on the right hand there is the final ggplot, but there is no not the underlying code that is used. In contrast, you see the 2 library calls in the beginning. So this code is also printed in the final rendered file, and this is because the first this first chunk of R code, going from line 16 to line 19, doesn't have this chunk option echo equals false. So this is the idea of chunk options. They allow us to specify how the R code written in this chunk gets translated into the rendered options. And there are a couple of useful chunk options that are about to use all the time. They will pretty quickly become very familiar to you, and there's no need to look them up. Others are more specific, but that's not a problem because you can always look them up in the internet. once you know what you actually want to do with your document. What is happening if you're actually rendering the Quarto document into your desired file format? This is just some general information for you to know what's going up under the hood. There's no need to actually understand the details, but it might be useful, especially if you run into problems, to at least have heard about these terms. Because assume you've written your Quarto document. This is a file that ends with has a QMD ending. And if you render this document to any different format, what is happening is that there's first of all an engine called knitr that is used to transform your QMD document into a complete Markdown document. During this context, all the R code is going to be executed. The results and output of this R code is in some sense saved and all translated into pure Markdown. And then the second engine is called, which is called pandoc, and this is the engine that then takes this complete Markdown code and translates it into Word or PDF or HTML. So there's a lot of different things going on under the hood. And I think that's only important for you if you're running into trouble or you have some error messages. Because if you have an error message that somehow refers to something called pandoc or knitr, then you might know at which stage of the process this might happen and what you need to look up. But there's no need to learn the specifics of knitr or pandocs to use QMD to create, for example, Word or PDF files. Especially because the syntax is exactly the same for all these different applications. So the focus here will be really on writing Quarto documents, not so much on the specifics of the rendering process that is then underlying the creation of these final documents.